Okay, friends, let's talk about the number one thing you want to talk about. Should I buy SpaceX stock? Today on the weekly update. All right, friends, let's talk about it. Should I buy SpaceX? Here's what you need to know. First up, let's discuss the number one thing you want to talk about, the SpaceX IPO. But before we do that, let's take a look at the markets. So here's the market, same way we've always been looking at it. Green and red candles are the S&P 500. Yellow is the 50-day moving average. Purple is the 200-day moving average. And what do you notice? Well, we have blasted through to all-time highs and the market continues to chug higher. Basically, everything that I said last time we looked at the market is still relevant. Earnings have been fantastic, mainly driven by the chip space and the AI build out. The market has been continuing to careen higher and higher. Volume continues to be anemic. And so if I were to look at this market and diagnose it, well, we're in an uptrend. We're in a healthy uptrend. But one of the things that I think there are some defects in this formation around the low volume. And if I were to sort of explain, how is the market doing so well on such low trading volumes? Well, I think it's doing so well because everyone is mostly hedged and they're taking whatever extra funds that they have and just kind of taking flyers at some upside. So it's been a great environment. It's just been an interesting environment in that regard. But let's talk about SpaceX here for a second. So my phone has been ringing off the hook, and everyone wants to talk about SpaceX, so let's do it. And what I wanted to do first, before I answer, should we buy some SpaceX? I want to sort of define what it is that we're buying. So what is SpaceX? Well, SpaceX is three companies in one. There's the rocket company. So that is the very public, the launch services, getting satellites to orbit. That's Starship, that's Falcon, that's, Raptor engines, all that sort of stuff. There's connectivity, that's Starlink. This is, that cluster of microsatellites that can beam, high-speed internet anywhere on the planet, with, plans for direct to cell, maybe some telecom, operations there, plus Department of Defense, over both of these. And then there's the AI component, which is Twitter, XAI, all that sort of stuff, maybe eventually space data centers. So this is really what SpaceX is. It's three companies in one. When you buy the IPO, that's what you're getting. You're getting the rockets, you're getting Starlink, and you're getting AI put together. If I were to do a business analysis of SpaceX, and this comes from one of my favorite analyst partners, he did kind of like the definitive, it's like a 54-page research on the SpaceX IPO. To my eyes, and I'm blocking some of the numbers here, you don't really need the numbers, but what I think is there's a good, bad, and ugly when it comes to SpaceX. So let's do not only the good, let's do the great. The great is Starlink. Starlink is amazing. It's a business that's growing very rapidly. It's a business that has fantastic margins. The margins continue to improve. It's a business that has a growth path. It's a business that it's very clear, Starlink is great. And as good as Starlink is, it's basically, only 60% of the revenue. The next largest segment is space. Space is an okay business, the rockets. The rockets are good. They're just pedestrian in terms of, how big this market can get. They're pedestrian in terms of margins. It requires a lot of capital expenditure. So this is sort of like a heavy manufacturing business, maybe kind of like an autos business, but larger than that. It's an okay business, right? And when we talk about SpaceX, we're talking about, the better part of a $2 trillion IPO valuation. So okay businesses, kind of don't cut the mustard here. And then there's a terrible slash fraudulent business, which is XAI. And I'm not telling you anything new here. You know that if you invest along with Elon, you're going to get a little bit of terrible fraudulent businesses inside of it. X is not great at all. What was formerly Twitter is just kind of like a bad business, and their AI, solutions, that really isn't good either. Grok is not up to scale for the other AIs. The other AIs are much better, much more integrated, much more useful tools. So Grok is kind of going by the wayside. And Elon knows this. That's why he licensed data centers to Anthropic, which is a fantastic AI company, because they know that, Grok just isn't getting it done, and, Twitter is terrible. This is a smaller segment. This is, basically 17% of the revenue of SpaceX. And the analogy here is it's kind of like the Solar City. Inside Tesla right now, there's Solar City. Solar City was terrible. It was a bad business. It was purchased for Elon to bail out Kimball Musk, his brother, who was, running Solar City. XAI is the same sort of thing going on here. And in every Elon deal, you're going to get a little bit of this. But that's how you want to think about SpaceX, right? It's three businesses. One is fantastic. One is okay. One is terrible. That's what's inside the SpaceX IPO. If you were to look at, again, sourcing from the same report, if you were to look at SpaceX in terms of, multiple as to, what you're going to pay for this IPO, it's stratospheric. And it's no surprise that it's stratospheric. This is an Elon company, but this one is, pretty amazing. And SpaceX actually isn't that hard to value because we have publicly traded comparisons or, private, widely held comparisons to sort of assess these businesses. So if I were to look at, SpaceX valuation or the XAI valuation, we can sort of appraise that. We can look at Anthropic, which I think is, by far the best AI lab right now. You're paying, almost a 2x multiple up for XAI. XAI is absolutely not worth that. If we look at the rocket launch, we've got Rocket Lab here, which is publicly traded rocket launch. And again, SpaceX is, you're paying way more. Now, the space business at SpaceX is a better business than Rocket Labs. But all I'm saying here is, it's at least, you can at least, you've got some comparisons. You've got some comps to compare it to. Is it, 3x as good? Maybe. XAI is really the only one that I don't like at all. And then, of course, you've got Starlink and satellites and space-based internet, and connectivity is, really amazing sort of technology. But we also have some analogs there. Iridium, Viasat, there's a lot of companies. Space-based telecom, was sort of a thing. These businesses are much cheaper, but they're nowhere near as good as Starlink. So you package all that together, you get SpaceX, and it's just a, sort of like an unbelievable package, certainly an eye-popping valuation. But my point in showing you this slide and talking about these businesses is to say that SpaceX isn't the sort of thing that can't be modeled. In fact, I think it can be modeled, and it can be modeled, pretty handily, because we do have analogs in the market for all the other different parts of its business. So let's get to the summary. If we look at these businesses, if we look at what the SpaceX IPO is coming out for, should I buy SpaceX? Yes or no? What is the answer? Well, here's my answer. My answer is it's not necessary. Now, that is an interesting answer. It's not necessary. That is not a yes or no, right? You're asking me, should I buy SpaceX? And I think in 99% of cases, my belief is that it's not necessary, and here's why. If you look at the index analysis of what's happening around SpaceX, the indexes aren't dumb. They know you want this thing. The indexes know that if you leave the indexes to go buy SpaceX, you're going to take your business elsewhere, and they want your business. So one of the things that we're seeing with SpaceX is rewriting the rules for index inclusion. FTSE Global Equity Index Series newly announced fast entry rules, which is going to allow SpaceX to enter these indexes before it otherwise would have, basically qualified. And I think this is really the first test of the post-pandemic financial regime, which is where companies target indexation, target indexing flows. If you can't get index flows when your IPO comes out, you're really not going to IPO. That's part of the reason why we have these, jaw-droppingly large IPOs coming. Anthropic, OpenAI, and SpaceX. They're trying to get their valuations high enough over the $1 trillion barrier so that index flows can support their valuations. And there's a lot of research on this. So much passive investing, which, is fantastic. I don't want to say anything bad about passive investing, but passive investing, one of the things that it does is it allows overvalued companies to become even more overvalued, at least if you're using historical context. And so you want your company to be as overvalued as you possibly can, because then you're going to capture more flow out of the indexes. And it's not just the FTSE indexes that are doing this, that are rolling out the red carpet for SpaceX. VTI, total market indexes from Vanguard, right? Fast track rule, which allows eligible IPOs to be added after 5 days of trading. So if you don't do anything, if you don't buy in the SpaceX IPO, but if you own VTI, you're going to have SpaceX within 5 days of trading, probably. Again, all of this stuff is perspective. The IPO needs to happen. So some of this is a little bit, sort of speculative, but I'm just letting you know how it works. NASDAQ 100, QQQ. NASDAQ 100 put in fast entry rules for mega IPOs, right? They know you want this thing, so they're going to give it to you. Went into effect May 1st, allows quicker entry within 15 trading days. So within 15 trading days, NASDAQ, the QQQs, you're going to have SpaceX. So VTI will have SpaceX, QQQ will have SpaceX. Here's the Russell 1000, IWB, Russell 1000 Growth, IWF. They have fast entry rules as well. Potentially could be added in September, maybe December. SPY, S&P 500. This is generally the latest entry that you could possibly get. SPY is currently looking at a review of their rules. They're looking at a fast entry rule as well. That comes out tomorrow. Tomorrow they will tell us, if they're going to allow fast entry into the SpaceX IPO, into the S&P 500. My expectation is yes, they will. So what this will do, this will allow, certain mega IPOs, and really, any of these mega IPOs that we're talking about here is basically Anthropic, OpenAI, and SpaceX. They're going to get into all of the indexes very quickly. So do you need to buy SpaceX? It's probably not necessary. So what does this all mean? SpaceX is going to be an exceptional IPO in all senses of the word. A flashy Elon company is obviously going to generate a lot of investment hype, and certainly we are seeing that now. My phone is ringing off the hook. Emergency meetings to add SpaceX are happening right now. What I would tell you, though, my analysis, the SpaceX business is a nugget of gold, which is Starlink, attached to an okay business, the rockets, with a little bit of puffery, XAI. And that's pretty much par for the course for Elon. You always get a little bit of that in his companies, and that's what he's doing. So should you buy SpaceX? I'm okay going on the record to say it's not necessary. Is that going to deter any of you? No. I understand the market. I understand where we're at. I understand what client psychology is like. I know you're going to want, SpaceX ahead of its entry to all of these things. But what I'm telling you is the message of this, video today is to say that if you were in a coma and if all you did was let our systems run the way they run, you would get your SpaceX exposure anyway. So there you go. Should you buy SpaceX? It's not necessary. You may end up doing it anyway. So I'll see you next week for the review. Take care. Okay, friends, that was the video. Hope you liked it. If you found it informative, good, entertaining, I'd love if you could scroll down here beneath the video and give me a like there. It helps us out with the algorithm. And then if you want to be notified first of anything new that we upload to the channel, if you come over here, click subscribe, you'll be the first to know as soon as we upload anything. Appreciate it. See you soon.